All set?
So it's setting up.
All right, I'm going mute.
So it looks like we are live. So that seems to have worked. And let me put.
I'm on the page. I don't see it.
Maybe refresh. I can see it. I'm seeing it on my phone. Let me get this relay link.
Got it.
It looks like people are still joining. I put a link in the comments. We do have captioning for today's event. It's streaming live. I put the link to the website in the comments for this video. So if you would like to be viewing the captioning and you can hear me, you can go and click on that link. And if you are hopefully, if you need that captioning and you are unable to hear this, hopefully you've seen my comment and the link and you're able to be reading this message this week. And we're really excited to be working with Maryland Relay to have captioning this week. And like we've done in past weeks, there will be captioning available on the video on the Facebook page after this event is finalized and the video goes live on Facebook, or sorry, is saved on Facebook. It looks like some folks are still joining, but I can go ahead and just give a brief overview quickly. Reminder, Disability Rights Maryland, who we are. We are the state's protection and advocacy, and we work on behalf of Marylanders with disabilities across the state and a variety of disabilities. And this is the education team's Q&A regarding different issues, whatever questions you have about return to school, we really want to hear from you. I don't see any comments yet this week, so I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Megan Berger, for a little bit of an explanation about some issues that parents might be seeing come up with discipline during COVID.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again this week. So most people are, thinking discipline. How is discipline going to work? Is it even going to happen during, the virtual learning setting? And we are, as we have sort of thought through discipline in the virtual format and reviewed some of the district's reopening plans, we were encouraged to see that some districts' reopening plans had separate discipline sections specific to virtual learning. And they, some districts really took a positive discipline approach, trauma-informed approach. One district, suggested that there be a moratorium on discipline for the first few weeks of school or even the first quarter of school while, youth are transitioning back to school. But some of the things, just some of red flags to look out for because virtual learning, the students experienced it in the spring, but that was such a pivot and, it was very disorganized, but now we're back in the virtual learning setting and just some red flags to look for. These first few weeks, there really shouldn't be any disciplining of students, and that might look like being excluded from a virtual classroom. That should not be happening. There has to be an understanding that students have gone through a lot over the past few months with the pandemic, and everything that our country has been going through. And so I know that most districts are really trying to have a really strong focus on the social emotional well-being of our students, transitioning them, preparing them this week for what the etiquette of virtual learning is, and really teaching the students, these are the expectations for a virtual learning setting. So if you hear of, or your child, experiences any type of punitive response or discipline, please give us a call. And once students return in school, some of the things that they should not be disciplined for are things related to, the new COVID procedures or health risks. So failing to wear a mask, failing to stay 6 feet apart, they should not be disciplined for those things. And again, we would want to hear from you if that's happening. We do know over the spring session of distance learning, some youth were suspended for inappropriate online behavior. So I know that that's something, to be on the lookout for, but we are really wanting to know if school systems are taking a punitive approach with this virtual learning session. Happy to answer any questions about that, or Megan, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so a couple comments did come into the chat while you were talking. Shifting gears a little bit from discipline, there was a question about, I'm going to take them out of order because I think the second question will help us answer the first. So one is, if we signed a virtual IEP amendment in the spring, are we able to remove it now that virtual is for an entire semester, and any advice on getting back to regular IEP services? And so I'll take that to start off. Something I've said in a couple of the other Q&As is that one thing we're really advising parents is to find that last IEP that was in place prior to the closures, your last in-school IEP, and hold on to that. That's something that's going to be important. Keep that in a place where you can reference it throughout. Many districts, when we first had this shift to remote learning, didn't base the plan for virtual learning off of the in-school IEP. They took an approach of what is possible, what do we think is possible to implement in a virtual environment. And what we are recommending for the beginning of this school year is virtual or not, hybrid or not, however the district is approaching learning, what you should do is look at the last IEP in place prior to the closures and look at all of the different goals and services on the IEP and discuss with the team how that can be done in a virtual environment. And of course, you can add to that if new needs have arisen during this period of school closures. But to the extent that your child had goals and services before the school closures, the team should be discussing how it can meet those needs in a remote environment. And if it can't meet those needs in a remote environment, documenting that and either working on creative solutions using, brainstorming different models, or by just noting that it isn't possible in a virtual environment and flagging that as something to be discussed upon a return to school. And then Megan, I'm going to pass the second part of this over to you. It was for a student who has IEP, an IEP with speech and OT, but how is that supposed to be implemented during this time because the student hasn't been receiving those related services?
Okay. That's a good question, and I know something that a lot of parents are wondering about. So, so first of all, your child ideally would have been, receiving some services in the spring through telehealth if possible, and we know in some situations it wasn't possible. So one thing to sort of keep in the back of your mind is compensatory education for the services that, possible compensatory education for the services that your child didn't receive in the spring. But moving forward, yes, as Megan Collins said, this fall, the school systems are reverting, back to the full IEP. The full brick and mortar IEP is the starting point. So if your child has 30 minutes of speech language, 30 minutes of OT a week, that's the expectation that they receive those related services. And we know that a lot of districts are doing that through telehealth. And so that is the expectation that yes, they are receiving them. You could certainly request an IEP meeting to discuss the fact that your child didn't receive the services and what's going to be the plan moving forward to ensure that the services are received. And keep a log of what is received and what isn't, so that compensatory education, when they do an individualized assessment, and compensatory education can be figured out for the missed sessions.
So it looks like more questions are coming in. And one caller, viewer rather, wants to know about COVID tutoring and where that information can be obtained.
So we were able to obtain information about allotments to individual districts in the reopening plan for the district. And so if you want to see how your district is using that funding, that might be a place to check.
And we did, I think maybe 2 live sessions ago, we had, provided a little more information about the COVID tutoring, and the CARES Act established the Coronavirus Relief Fund to make payments for specific uses to states, and Governor Hogan elected to make $200 million of the fund available to support school districts across the state through 3 additional grant programs, and one of those is the CARES Act tutoring. But as Megan Collins said, each district is is implementing that funding, and we will monitor districts, to figure out how they're implementing the money and make sure that it's being used equitably. But if there is sort of individual, concerns for your student, you can always go back to the IEP team to address concerns there as well.
So another viewer is interested in getting information about one-on-one, as she feels her child really needs it. And also there's a concern about missed OT sessions and whether or not those sessions can be made up.
So the first part of that, with a one-to-one, this is another thing we've discussed in a couple of previous live sessions. So it's definitely a concern that we're hearing from a lot of parents. And what we've been recommending is that parents document, since you're the one who's working with your student and you're observing their needs, document what you're seeing a need for a one-on-one to help with. How is it exactly that they're unable to access? So are they walking away from the computer? Are they closing the computer? Are they sitting there and just not attending? And what are you doing to engage them in the learning? And meet with your team and ask your team if there's any solutions that the team can suggest that might assist in meeting your students' needs virtually, if that's possible. We know there have been some instances where paras are working virtually, some recommendations about creative uses of technology. And if it's a case where your student simply cannot learn in a virtual environment without a one-on-one provision of one-on-one services, then that isn't something that should fall on you as the parent. And it's something that the school should be discussing how they can provide and how they can meet that need. And I saw in the comments that it looked like the parent was getting feedback from the district that wasn't something they could provide for some reason or another. But if you are really reaching that roadblock with the school, especially if they acknowledge that your child needs that service in order to engage and learn, then that's a case where we'd recommend you reach out for more specific guidance from us. And you can reach, we can put in the chat afterwards our contact information. You can do an intake with us for more technical specific assistance on that.
The next question is a parent. She says her son's special needs school is laying everything pretty much on her, the parent, to do the virtual learning. I have asked them to send someone to my home. They said it would take too long to find someone, and then it would also be a liability due to safety precautions due to COVID-19. I explained I have 3 other children. I have another child with an IEP. I need to help. Then 3 days I'm working. They know he isn't getting anything unless they send someone to my home. Then they say, well, on your own time, try to do this or that. I have 4 children. Where's the extra time? I have a child who plays sports. I have chores and bills to do. Where is my extra time?
So this is the one I was alluding to when I was saying, if your student is not able to engage, keep that documentation, document what you're doing, whether it be writing notes, keeping a journal, keeping a video, and then meet with the team and share your concerns and get them to document whether there's anything more they can be doing to engage. This is something that is continuing to come up in the comments. And there's another parent asking something similar about if a student can't sit behind a computer and the parents have to work or would have to take time off work to sit with their children. There's an obligation that all parents have during this pandemic, which is to make sure that their children are safe and supervised during the day, whether that be by the parents or by childcare, wherever it is. You have an obligation still to make sure your children are safe and supervised, but that is very different than sitting one-on-one beside your student, pointing them at the computer and being that one-on-one aid, engaging them in education. And that goes beyond what is expected of parents at this time. And so to the extent that the district is acknowledging, the extent that you are seeing, first and foremost, that your child can't engage without you providing that service, we'd recommend you meet with the team, make that request, share that information with them, and ask what they can do or ask them to document that they can't meet that need. And if they are saying they can't provide a one-on-one, then you can request that they bring, as schools are opening up, there might be more options and more flexibility, like bringing small groups of children into the school. It might become possible for one-on-one aides to be in the home. It's certainly possible for the district to contract with private providers to send someone into the home, or reimburse parents for contracting with private providers. So there's a lot of different options, and it's a matter of first and foremost sharing your concerns with the school, documenting that need for services, and then asking the school to work with you on finding a solution. And if you're really not able to find a solution, then reaching out to us. And before I forget, Tasha, there was a 2-part question and I only answered the first part. So Megan Berger, if you want to speak to making up missed services.
Sure. And I'll get to the making up missed services, but I just wanted to add a few things about the one-to-one aid, because I know this is weighing heavy on all parents. If you can think about it, does your child need essentially a paraprofessional, a one-on-one sitting next to them in order to access and participate in their virtual learning? All parents are have this burden placed on them to sort of supervise the virtual learning. But if your child cannot access or participate in it without a paraprofessional working with them throughout the day, as Megan Collins said, document that, document it and go to the team and really paint a clear picture for the team about all of the assistance that your child needs. Another thing that you may consider, if appropriate, is that if your child's healthcare providers, maybe a developmental pediatrician, maybe a psychiatrist or a psychologist, or if there's a health provider who can write a letter really explaining your child's disability and why that prevents them from participating in or access virtual learning, that can also help, and you can bring that to the table. You can bring that to the IEP team and share that, and that can sometimes be helpful as well. In terms of missed services, yes, your children will be owed compensatory education for missed services. Once schools return in person and everybody's back in the brick and mortar school, the issue of recovery services or compensatory education is going to be, there's going to have to be IEP meetings for all students to address that issue. And it's going to be an individualized assessment to determine whether compensatory education is needed, and was there regression, and it will be individualized. But in terms of missed related services sessions, again, keep a log of the missed sessions, and you will be able to, it'll be addressed through compensatory education.
So our next question is, are all districts reverting back to in-school IEP? They were told that BCPS is following virtual IEP amendments.
So I can take that one. All of the different districts are handling the actual documentation and forms for these documents differently. Some are putting it, some are documenting it one way, some are documenting it another way. But the obligation that they all have, and truly have had this entire time, is to provide all of the services from the child's IEP. So whether they document it on, one form or another, they have to provide all of the IEP services necessary. And they all should be reverting back to either providing or documenting why they can't provide every service.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we talked a little bit last week about, some schools are sending parents home amended IEPs, which is sort of the full brick and mortar IEP with some virtual and with some sort of COVID amendments to allow the student to access the general education curriculum in the virtual setting. And so those are sort of, you can think of those as sort of time-limited COVID amendments to the IEP that are going to remain during this emergency. But then once students return in school, those amendments, will sort of go away, and you'll go back and revert back to the full IEP. So if your district sends you in the mail a amended IEP with specific amendments addressing access for virtual learning, you can take a look at those and just, consider, parents, consider whether the amendments that the school system proposed, do they make sense with what you as the parent have observed since the spring? Parents are in this unique position. We're observing our students participating in virtual learning, and we, in a way, have a unique set of observations and knowledge that we can share with the school system. So if the proposed amendments make sense with what you've observed, then you can consider signing the IEP. But if they don't make sense, if there's a disconnect, if you don't think they're necessary, or you think different adaptations need to be made, then you can request an IEP meeting at any time to review the amendments before signing off.
And it looked like someone had asked a clarifying question for what what I had mentioned about documenting the school's failure to provide one-on-one support. And so what that would look like, and I'm not 100% sure whether you mean how would you document it or how would the school document it, so I'll just answer both. You can document it, like I said, by keeping like a daily logbook or an incident almost logbook of just what you're observing, and collecting data in the form of, Wednesday, September 9th, we sat down, we opened up the computer and the student walked away and I did X and the student refused to return, or the student did Y when that happened. On Thursday, September 10th, this is what happened when I tried to engage student with virtual learning. Student did X, I did this in order to respond. And then you take that to a meeting with the school and you can request that they come up with a way of assisting you in engaging the student in virtual learning, whether it be behavioral strategies to help them stay seated and near the computer, or to stay focused on the computer. Different students may be having difficulty engaging with virtual learning for a number of different reasons. So keep your data collection on what it is that your student, doesn't have to be sophisticated data collection, just notes or video or whatever it is of the difficulties you're observing, and then take that to the school team and ask them to help you problem solve. And if the response you're getting from the school is, well, there's nothing we can do about that, or you need to really, and then they're describing you providing one-on-one services, then you can request that the school provide a one-on-one. And if they refuse, you can ask them to document in a prior written notice that you had requested that they provide a one-on-one service and that they refused to provide that service. So hopefully that answers the question. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments and feel free to ask further clarifying questions.
And I was just going to add, when we're talking about one-on-ones, some districts, have been offering and providing virtual one-on-one services, and that might be enough for some students. Even some students who have one-to-ones on their brick and mortar IEP might not need that in a virtual environment. Some students, based on their individualized needs, might just need the help of a virtual one-to-one. So someone who's calling them in the morning and motivating them to get on the computer and is in the live sessions with them and offering them support and offering tech assistance. And so that's an option too, in addition to the sort of in-person one-to-one. So just wanted to make sure that, there's different levels of assistance that can be discussed in IEP meeting.
So our next question is, with virtual learning, many of our children with severe disabilities are not adapting to virtual learning and or cannot sit behind a computer. Many of us parents have to work. If we take off from work so we can sit with our children for this virtual learning, will that money be reimbursed to us?
So I'll go ahead and start this one, and then Megan Berger, you can jump in afterwards. I alluded to this a little bit earlier when I was talking about possible options for the provision of one-on-one services. If the team determines that the student needs the one-on-one service and the district says that they can't provide that service, can't contract with someone else to provide the service, you can request that you contract with someone, or you can request reimbursement. And you would need to document that request. Again, you'd need to document that you had requested the school provide you with a one-on-one, and have them write a prior written notice that says that they are refusing to provide that service. And then you would have a number of options at that point. And one of those options we think would be to make a request for the district, especially if it's well documented. Like I said, if you've kept documentation that it's truly a necessary service, then you could make a request to the school for reimbursement for you to provide that service. The one thing I would say to keep in mind would be to make the request sooner rather than later. If you are going to request that the school reimburse you for paying someone else to provide a service or reimburse you for providing a service, I would say to keep documentation of why you believe the service is necessary, make the request for the school to provide that service themselves, and then put the school on notice that you are going to want to seek reimbursement for it. And anything you want to add, Megan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, there's just to manage expectations, you know, it would really have to be, you know, documented as a necessary service. And, you know, I'm sure some districts would push back. And so I would just say to plan really well and don't sort of expect it. I mean, that would be that's, you know, what you would be advocating for, but don't plan around sort of this guarantee that would happen. So this is a incredibly difficult time for all parents, and it's really hard, and people are put in extremely difficult situations and making incredibly challenging childcare decisions that are hardships for families. And so, I do think just being as upfront and transparent with the IEP team, with the principal of the school about your individual situation and your family situation and what a hardship it is, you know, keep emailing the school and being transparent about that.
And while you were adding that, and that's a great point, 2 comments came in that I want to acknowledge. One said, all requests in writing make a paper trail, which I want to just amplify. It's always best when you're making requests from the district, particularly if the district is disagreeing that something is necessary or is refusing to provide a service. Definitely make sure you document in writing that you requested something. And then a clarifying question on notice for refusal to provide one-on-ones. Does that mean that prior written notice is ahead of an IEP meeting or live during the meeting? The word prior is a little confusing here, and I agree. I didn't write the law, but I agree that it is confusing. And the prior written notice actually comes at the end of the IEP meeting. The school is, I guess the word prior comes from the fact that the school is giving you notice of their refusal with time to essentially to appeal that decision and to request review, request mediation, request a due process hearing. But it doesn't come before the meeting. It comes at the end of the meeting or after the meeting. When you receive the documents, you should receive a PWN saying that a service was requested or a service was proposed and a service was refused. And that can happen. It can document a number of different things. It can document when a student is moved to a more restrictive environment. And so it can say that a less restrictive environment was considered and determined not appropriate because the student needed more services. It can document that a parent requested a service and the school doesn't think it's necessary, or it can document that the school proposed a service and the parent refused it. So it's just a way of documenting. And I understand and agree that prior is confusing in that document, but the PWN comes after the meeting.
So our next question. I spoke with our new caseworker for my son's 7th grade team. She said today that this weekend they would forward his IEP to the teachers and review his needs. Shouldn't this have already been done? I work full-time out of home. Son has 3rd grade reading level, was struggling with where to find each class code. Any advice?
So yes, they should have, they absolutely should have been aware. The teachers, the aides, everybody working with your son should have been aware and implementing his IEP the first day of school. So again, it sounds like you are in touch with the case manager. You could try emailing the case manager and expressing your concerns to see if you all can work together to troubleshoot, especially with the class codes. Maybe they can get an aide to help with that, or to sort of do an additional session with your son to show him how to navigate and, you know, work with all the codes. And if you feel like in your communications and your emails, again, documenting a paper trail, if that's, you know, if email is available. But if you feel like you don't, it doesn't come to a good resolution and you still have questions and concerns, then request an IEP meeting so that you can explain your concerns and your son's difficulties and, you know, his struggles accessing the virtual classrooms and, you know, technology. You can always ask that he be provided training on the technology and accessing all the different codes, because it's a lot. It's I'm watching my own children go through this process, and it's so much and it's so overwhelming, especially for little ones and, you know, kids with disabilities navigating it all. So it's very overwhelming.
It looks like somebody in the comments suggested that they made links into QR codes so that the student can log on with a QR code. So that's just an example of a creative way when you're working with a team or you know, workshopping with other parents what's worked. And, you know, technology has been a learning curve for all of us, but it can definitely do great things. So that's a cool idea.
And so, Megan C., it looks like you already answered the question related to documentation on the parents' part and on the part of the school. So I'm gonna move ahead. And also the question about the one-on-one. All right. So another parent question is related to an FSP, I believe. She has FSIP is tomorrow. He has multiple services and goes to Head Start. The 2-year-old class is doing virtual learning through November. His vision therapist at Maryland School for the Blind wants very limited screen time due to the damage from SBS. I would like to ask for my son to go to daycare center and have this paid for. He needs the socialization due to the abuse he suffered. How do I advocate and facilitate this?
So I'm gonna broaden some of these questions and say speak in general terms, and then if you do have specific questions about this student, or if anyone has specific questions about their student, you can feel free to reach out to us and do an intake or speak to us in a more private, confidential manner about your child's unique needs. But as far as making requests for any student who has difficulty with instruction provided through a computer, you can request accommodations for that. Certainly, there's a number of different reasons why a student would have a difficult time accessing instruction via a computer. You can request paper-based, you can request live instruction, and as long as, again, this goes back to the documentation, document why you believe that a service is needed, and whether it be medical, whether it be behavioral, whatever it is, documenting why you believe that's necessary, and then discussing it with the team and discussing possible solutions. And if the school, for any reason, can't provide that service, discuss with the school what other options might be available, be it having the school provide a service in your home, or having a private provider, or having your student go and attend a service somewhere else. It would just be a matter, like we discussed earlier, and to take a step back and say, you know, I don't want to make it sound like any of this process is easy or is quick, but again, just emphasize that it's important to keep documentation of what's happening, of what you're requesting, and of the school's response, and then trying to work with the team to come up with creative solutions. Megan Berger, anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to say, it sounds like in that question there was reference to a vision specialist. So again, if you can get a letter from your child's healthcare providers sort of confirming your concerns and any issues with virtual learning, then you can bring that to your meeting, and that would be helpful. Or the provider could call in to the Zoom, or participate in the Zoom. However, you can have the health provider's input provided to the team. I think that's always of benefit.
Our next question is, how can I get my son's school to do his assessments? They won't budge. They know they technically have a timeline to meet, but they keep just responding. They're like 1,000 kids behind when doing assessments. I don't know what else to do. I mentioned about them hiring someone else to come in my home or for him to go someplace to take these tests, and they still just say, we will get to his assessments as soon as we can. Well, now he started school without being on the IEP and still just on his 504.
Yeah, I was going to say, Megan, I know you have a situation. I know you've done, yeah.
So I'll go ahead and start off, and then you can add in Megan Berger. So the quick answer is the district has to make sure that they're evaluating students, because, and I think you mentioned this in the comment, the timelines weren't waived. The timelines are still very much in place, and they do have an obligation to provide services. And what I would recommend is discussing, for sort of a short-term fix, discussing with the 504 team whether there's anything else that can be provided through the 504 process in order to provide your student with the assistance that they need in order to access their education during this time. And then as a second step, you could request an IEP eligibility meeting and determine exactly what assessments are missing, whether there's any other data that could be used to discuss an eligibility decision, or whether they really are waiting on just that one assessment. And I would have them document the impact that not having service, what's the reason that the student was referred to an IEP in the first place? What is the impact on the education? And that way it's documented what is happening because your student doesn't have these services, and it'll be documented, the amount of time that they are continuing to go without that service. And you can then request, if they truly need a specific assessment based on whatever eligibility they're looking at, and there are eligibilities that require specific assessments. If they need that and they are unable to provide it, then I would renew the request that it be in person. And if they're not budging on that, and you've documented that your student can't access the instruction or has been failing to access the instruction based on the suspected disability, then I would recommend you could reach out to us for more specific technical assistance at that point. Do you have anything you wanted to add, Megan?
No.
Looks like we don't have any other questions right now.
So we've got about 15 minutes left. If anybody has any comments, you can go ahead and put them in the chat now. Any questions, you can put them in the chat now. Otherwise, I think to summarize, we can, let me take a look maybe at whether we hit everything from the list of things to emphasize. I guess the one thing, especially since we have the relay this week, that I want to emphasize, there was a question that came in last week about a student having an interpreter on their IEP. And so I want to make sure that we've got it here tonight, that the distance learning needs to be accessible to students with any kind of disability. And so schools do need to be making sure that accommodations are provided. If interpreters are needed, that those are provided. If different assistive technology is needed, that that's provided. If accommodations like paper-based assignments, chunking, anything like that, those accommodations do still need to be provided in this format. And other than that, it looks like the only thing that came in was someone saying, wish them luck for their IEP. So good luck with your IEP on Friday.
Yes, good luck.
Good luck to all parents out there navigating these uncharted waters. And thanks for joining us every week. We really appreciate it. And it's really helpful for us to hear from parents and to figure out what issues are, top of mind. And so, yeah, we're very appreciative of everyone's participation.
So there's another comment from the same parent about the IEP meeting. Should be reaching out for suggested modified day plans to not be required to be live on Zoom. 9 to 11:30 and 12:30 to 2:30, more than 1 hour a week anytime.
That's something that's another accommodation that was mentioned in previous Zooms, I think, of for students who for a variety of different reasons can't engage with a program at a particular time or can't log on at a particular time or sit for an extended length of time. And I think this was discussed a little bit last week because MSDE, I think like right before our session last week or shortly before, had released information about the mandatory hours of synchronous learning per day and how that was going to be split up. And, an extended period of time in front of a computer is difficult for, for anybody. And so definitely making requests where needed in order to make virtual learning accessible for your student and to make them successful where they can get the benefit of the education, whether that be through a combination of paper-based and virtual or virtual and in-person of some format, is definitely going to be important.
Yeah, and then I have one more thing, just sort of piggybacking on that. I know attendance can be, I know districts are taking formal attendance this year, but we know that certain students just aren't able to attend at the specific hours that the virtual learning instruction is happening, or for some of their sort of unique needs, they need their instruction at a certain time of day. And so again, that's something that if your IEP team isn't willing to work with you and your student to sort of find a schedule that meets their needs, that's another area where you could certainly give us a call and we can provide technical assistance on that issue.
Okay, so with that, it doesn't look like any new questions have come in, so I think we'll go ahead and sign off for today. I do want to give a disclaimer for next week. I think our webinar is going to be a Spanish webinar. Susanna, are you there? So we'll post about this on the Facebook page. Oh, there you go.
I am here, sorry.
So the webinar next week, is it going to be English and translated to Spanish, or is it going to be completely in Spanish? Do you know how that's going to work? I just want to let folks know when the next time we'll be back in different formats is.
So how we plan to do it is we're going to do it so that people can ask their questions in Spanish and they will be translated. The questions will be, I will be interpreting, so then we will be reading them in English and then translating the answer also back into Spanish. So whatever somebody says, you say in English and I will just say it in Spanish.
Okay. So it seems like English speaking parents will be able to be a part of that, but definitely Spanish speaking families will be able to access that next week. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, because a question came in, is that is there about how AAs can be used during virtual learning. I'm not sure what an AA is But for folks who, the first part of that was that they had missed the first 20 minutes of today. And if for folks who missed any part of any of these webinars, you can go back. It'll be visible live after, and it will be on the DRM page. So once we hit end, I don't know how quickly exactly it goes saved, but they will all be visible on videos on the Disability Rights Maryland Facebook page. So it should say, let me see. When you're viewing the page, there should be a tab that says videos, and all of our old Q&As are available on that tab of the Disability Rights Maryland webpage. And of course, when I went to go navigate to that to explain it to parents, I lost the comment. So Tasha, let me know if anything came in last minute or if we can go ahead and sign off for this week.
The only other thing came in was just a comment about Leslie Margolis doing a Q&A for Baltimore County on Monday, but no other questions.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Until next time.